The Beekeeper's Trail, Part 1, The Missing Dog. Settle in and take a slow breath in and out. Let yourself relax. This is a story about a girl, a dog, a trail of bees, and a forest full of quiet secrets. At the foot of a tall green mountain, in a small wooden house with a tin roof that hummed softly whenever it rained, there lived a girl named Wren. She was 10 years old, with 2 front teeth slightly crooked and a habit of humming to herself when she was thinking hard. She lived with her father, who repaired clocks for the whole village, and with a scruffy brown dog named Pepper, who had one ear that stood up and one that flopped down, and who followed Wren absolutely everywhere. Wren had woken to find his little bed by the fireplace empty. She had checked the garden. She had checked the woodshed. She had checked underneath the porch, where Pepper sometimes hid when thunder rumbled, even though there hadn't been a storm in days. "Pepper?" she called, stepping out into the cool morning air. Her voice drifted across the yard and out toward the tree line, where the mountain forest began in earnest. Tall pines and golden birches, standing shoulder to shoulder like old friends keeping watch. No bark answered her, but something else caught her attention, a low, gentle humming sound drifting from the direction of the trees. Not Pepper's bark, not the wind. It took her a moment to place it, and when she did, her eyes widened. Bees. A long, lazy trail of them, drifting one after another along the same invisible path, disappearing into the shadow of the forest. And there, paw prints pressed into the soft morning dirt beside the trail of bees, leading the exact same way, were Pepper's tracks. Wren didn't think twice. She pulled on her boots, grabbed her father's old walking stick from beside the door, and followed. Part 2. Into the Pines. The forest welcomed her the way it always did, with the smell of pine sap and damp earth, with shafts of early light slipping between the branches and landing in soft golden pools on the path. Wren had walked these woods many times before, but never quite this far, and never quite this early. The bees moved steadily ahead of her, neither hurrying nor slowing, content in their quiet procession. Every so often one would peel away to investigate a late-blooming flower, then rejoin the line a moment later as if nothing had happened. Wren found herself watching them more than the path. There was something soothing about their unhurried rhythm, busy, but never frantic. "Pepper!" she called again, every so often, and listened. The forest answered only with birdsong and the soft creak of branches swaying overhead. The path began to climb, gently at first, a gradual slope through ferns and fallen pine needles, and then more noticeably, the trees thinning slightly to reveal glimpses of gray rock, and far above the rounded shoulder of the mountain itself, Wren paused to catch her breath beside a wide, flat boulder and looked back the way she'd come. The village was already small and distant below, rooftops like a scattering of brown and red leaves among the green. She turned back to the trail of bees, took a breath, and kept climbing. It was perhaps an hour later, though time moves strangely in a quiet forest, stretching and folding in ways that are hard to measure, when Wren heard it. A bark, distant, but unmistakably Pepper's particular, slightly hoarse little bark, the one he used when he'd found something interesting and wanted everyone to know about it immediately. "Pepper!" Wren broke into a run, following both the sound and the steady line of bees, which had grown thicker now, dozens of them moving together like a slow golden ribbon through the trees. She burst through a final curtain of low branches and stopped, breathing hard, at the edge of a clearing she had never seen before. Part 3. The Hidden Clearing. The clearing was bathed in warm light, ringed by tall pines that seemed to lean inward slightly, like curious onlookers. In the center stood a small wooden cabin, weathered gray and silver with age, its roof covered in soft green moss. Beside it stood a row of pale wooden boxes, stacked 2 and 3 high, each one humming gently with quiet, contented life. Beehives, dozens of them, and there, sitting at the base of one of the hive boxes with his tail thumping happily against the ground, was Pepper, utterly unharmed, utterly delighted with himself, and very clearly not the least bit sorry for the worry he'd caused. "Pepper, you silly dog," Wren said, half laughing, half scolding, as she crossed the clearing and knelt down to scratch behind his lopsided ears. He licked her chin enthusiastically, as if to say he'd simply found something far too interesting to wait for permission. "I see he's made a new friend," said a voice. Wren looked up, startled. An old woman stood in the cabin doorway, wrapped in a long gray shawl, her white hair pulled back in a loose braid. Her face was deeply lined, in the particular way of someone who has spent most of her life outdoors, and her eyes were a clear, pale blue, like the sky just before sunrise. She held a wooden frame covered in honeycomb in one gloved hand, moving with the calm, unhurried confidence of someone who had done this exact motion 10,000 times before. "I'm so sorry," Wren said quickly, scrambling to her feet. "My dog ran off and I followed the bees to find him. I didn't mean to intrude." The old woman waved a gloved hand gently, unbothered. "The bees don't mind visitors," she said, "and neither do I, so long as visitors move slowly and don't swat." She studied Wren for a moment with those pale, curious eyes. "You followed the trail all the way up the mountain. That's no small thing for someone your size." "I just wanted to find Pepper," Wren said. "Of course you did." The old woman smiled, and the lines in her face deepened warmly. "My name is Hazel. I keep the bees up here. Would you like to see how it's done before you head back down? I imagine your dog would appreciate a rest before the walk home." Wren glanced at Pepper, who had already flopped over contentedly in a patch of warm sunlight, looking distinctly unwilling to go anywhere just yet. She looked back at the rows of humming hives, at the honeycomb glistening gold in Hazel's hand, and felt the same pull of curiosity that had brought her up the mountain in the first place. "I'd like that very much," she said. Part 4. What the Bees Know. Hazel led her slowly between the rows of hives, moving with deliberate, unhurried steps. "The first thing you must understand about bees," she said, "is that they do not like to be rushed. Not the bees, and not the keeper. Everything here happens at its own pace." She showed Wren how to approach a hive calmly, how to recognize the low, steady hum of a content colony versus the higher, sharper buzz of an agitated one. She explained how each bee had its own role, some gathering pollen from the wildflowers scattered across the mountainside, some tending to the young in the hive, some standing guard at the entrance, watching for danger with quiet vigilance. "It took me almost a year," Hazel said, lifting a frame gently from one of the boxes, "before my very first jar of honey. A whole year of watching, waiting, learning what the bees needed instead of what I wanted from them." "A whole year just for one jar?" Wren asked, surprised. "A whole year," Hazel confirmed, with no trace of regret in her voice. "But it was the sweetest jar of honey I have ever tasted, before or since. Some things simply cannot be hurried, child. The bees taught me that long before I ever tasted a drop." They walked together to the edge of the clearing, where the trees opened up to reveal a steep little meadow tumbling down the mountainside, scattered with the last wildflowers of the season, purple, gold, and white, swaying gently in the mountain breeze. Bees drifted between them unhurriedly, moving from bloom to bloom with the same patient rhythm Wren had followed all morning. "I used to be in a great hurry when I was young," Hazel said, gazing out over the meadow, "in a hurry to grow up, to leave, to become someone important somewhere far away. Then I came to this mountain, almost by accident, much as you did today, and I found I had no desire to hurry anywhere, ever again." Wren thought about this for a long moment, watching the bees move calmly between the flowers, in no rush at all, and yet somehow accomplishing everything they needed to. "I think I understand," she said slowly. "It's not that they're slow. It's that they're not wasting anything. Every move means something." Hazel looked at her with something like quiet delight. "Yes," she said softly, "exactly that." Part 5. The Gift. By the time the afternoon sun had begun to soften and lengthen the shadows across the clearing, Wren knew it was time to start the walk home. Pepper, thoroughly rested and significantly more cooperative than he'd been that morning, trotted obediently to her side. Before she left, Hazel disappeared into the little mossy cabin and returned with a small glass jar, its contents glowing amber gold in the afternoon light. She pressed it gently into Wren's hands. "For your trouble," Hazel said, "and for finding your way up here with such patience, even when you were worried. That's a rarer thing than you might think, to stay calm and keep looking carefully instead of just running and shouting." Wren turned the jar over in her hands, watching the light catch in the honey. "Thank you," she said. "Will I be able to find my way back up here again?" Hazel smiled, and there was something knowing in her pale blue eyes. "The bees will always know the way," she said. "Follow them and be patient, and you'll find whatever you're looking for. That's generally how it works, up here on the mountain." Wren said her goodbyes, and with Pepper trotting contentedly at her heels, began the walk back down the mountain. The trail of bees had thinned now, most of them settling in for the evening, but a few still drifted alongside her for a while, as if seeing her safely, part way home, before peeling off toward the late flowers. The forest was different on the way down, not because anything had changed. The same pines, the same golden birches, the same soft carpet of fallen needles beneath her boots, but because she was looking at it differently, slower, more carefully, noticing the small things, a spider's web strung between two branches and catching the light like silver thread, a woodpecker's distant knocking, the particular green-gold color of the light filtering through the leaves at this exact hour. She thought about what Hazel had said, about not hurrying, about every small movement meaning something. By the time she reached her own front porch, the sun was low and orange behind the mountain, and her father was standing in the doorway with a look of mild, fond exasperation on his face. "There you are," he had said. "I was starting to wonder if I'd need to send out a search party." "Pepper ran off," Wren explained, "and I followed a trail of bees to find him. I met a beekeeper named Hazel. She lives up the mountain. She gave us this." She held up the jar of honey, glowing warm in the last of the daylight. Her father raised an eyebrow, clearly unsure whether to believe the whole of this story, but took the jar with interest anyway. "Well," he said, "that does sound like quite a morning." "It was," Wren said, and smiling she realized she meant it completely. Part 6. What stayed with her. That evening, Wren sat on the porch steps with Pepper curled beside her, watching the first stars appear over the dark silhouette of the mountain. Somewhere up there, hidden in its own quiet clearing, the hives would be settling for the night, the bees finished with their slow, careful work for the day. She thought about the whole year Hazel had waited for her first jar of honey, about how nothing about that wait had felt wasted to her, because every part of it had mattered. Wren didn't know it yet, but she would return to that clearing many times over the years that followed. In spring, when the wildflowers bloomed again, and in winter, when Hazel taught her how the bees slept through the cold, clustered together for warmth, patient as ever, waiting for the world to bloom once more. But that evening's all she knew was this. She had lost a dog and found a whole new way of moving through the world, a slower way, a more careful way, a way that noticed things. And really, when she thought about it, that seemed like a fair trade for one golden jar of honey. Thank you for spending this time with us in the garden. If this story brought a little warmth or wonder into your day, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who could use a gentle adventure. A new story blooms here every week. Until next time, keep wandering gently and keep noticing the small golden things.